Who's ready for Halloween? I thought I would do a Halloween inspired tutorial. What I'm going to use for this is some of the circle mold, and then I'm also going to use my regular 1 pound mold because this is kind of just a test batch. If I like this, I'm going to make it much bigger and probably add it to my Etsy store. So you can find most of all the ingredients at Nurture Soap. If you like anything in this video, there is links down in my description box below. The project that we're doing today is kind of like a Beetlejuice theme or whatnot, sort of scary monster vibe. I've seen a lot of people post this, so it's not like an original idea. I just thought I would show you some of the steps if you're maybe new to melt and pour soap and you wanted to watch, or if you just like watching these type of videos, that's fun too. So these little soap molds, we're going to start off with pouring just a tiny bit of clear melt and pour base with nothing added to it. And you just want to fill it the tiniest amount. So we're going to make the little eyeballs in these things. The whole soap mold for this holds about 2 ounces of soap. So if that gives you an idea about how much you need to get started, you probably need a little bit less than 2 ounces of the clear soap. But what I did was I just cut down some soap, and then with the extra, we are going to put a lot of black. I'm using a liquid dye. My liquid dyes I get off Amazon. I don't use them a lot because a lot of times the colors bleed on these specific liquid dyes. I have other ones that aren't as bad, but I'm not a huge fan of liquid dyes for melt and pour soap. Sometimes they work well for certain projects, but most of the time not my favorite. But anyway, they will work fine for this. It's a lot easier to mix this in with such a small quantity of soap that we're using. So I'm just taking my little dropper and I'm dropping just a tiny bit in the middle. So this is going to be like the iris of your eye. So you're kind of having to layer everything backwards when you're making the eyeballs, if that makes sense. I'm doing a bunch of them more than I need because I'm not sure which ones are going to come out good. And like I said, if you have extra soap, it's fine because we're going to use that as part of our soap design. We're just kind of going to go back and forth with the black and white to kind of give it like the Beetlejuice stripes that you guys are familiar with. Then after we put the black in the eyeball, I'm going to go ahead and do the color part of the eyeball. I'm also saving this as well, the extra that I have. I'm just going to set the container off to a side because I have an idea for the end process, and I'll kind of show you. So I'm using a neon green, and I'm also going to use glow in the dark. The neon colors on Nurture's website say they're not really for melt and pour soap. I don't really know why. The only thing that I was thinking is they are kind of hard to incorporate because they get really chunky. So I'm going to use a little bit of glycerin, and I'm going to mix the powders together, and I'm also going to mix the glycerin with it, so that way it gets like a little bit of a slurry, and that way when I add it to my clear liquid base, it actually incorporates really nicely. So if you didn't know that you can do that, that's just like a little tip. You can also use rubbing alcohol, but you really need to break it down, so that's why I'm using the glycerin, because I don't think the rubbing alcohol would do anything, and plus it might evaporate by the time I get around to using the rest of it. So I'm just going to take a scoop or so I get enough for the color pigment, and then I'm going to mix that in. I'm going to take my eyedropper again and kind of just drop little bits in each one. I don't want to cover the whole eyeball. So like I said, I just was kind of experimenting with this. I'm covering about, just making sure that I get over the black part. So on some of them, like you can see, there's a little bit less black than others. So like I said, experimenting with this. This is my test batch. If you guys have done this before and you know a better way to make these little eyeballs, please put a comment down below. I just think they're so fun. You can use these eyeballs for all kinds of projects. I've seen people do like dragon eyeballs, or any kind of spooky monster eyeballs, or just anything really. I don't know what else you guys have, like what creative ideas. But I've seen a lot of stuff out there in some of the groups I am, and I love it. This is something that I knew I could do, and I knew I could make a tutorial for it, so that's why I'm showing you guys the steps. The next part that we're going to do is cut down some of the white base. I'm doing a little over 2 ounces. I think it's about 2.5 to 3 ounces of soap. I'm letting it kind of cool down a little bit because I don't want it too hot, because I don't want it to ruin the design of what we have so far. And that has been sitting up for about 10 to 15 minutes before I'm pouring the white base on. So it's had time to kind of like harden a little bit because it's just such a small quantity of soap in the mold that it should be starting to harden anyway. But I'm just kind of filling that up, and I do kind of make a mess with it here. But again, all just like a test here, so I wasn't too like concerned about, you know, how it was going to look, if it was going to be a bit gooey, icky, yucky. But anyway, the 2 ounces is what fills those cavities, so I just made a little bit less. And then I noticed that this layer of the soap that the black we just poured was starting to harden by that time, so I kind of went ahead and scored it or made the top rough, and then I'm going to pour the white base on top. Again, trying to make sure that that white base is not too hot because I don't want it to melt the layer. I don't want the colors to run or bleed on that black. So I'm just going to pour it over the spatula as well so it doesn't like break a layer, because the soap was still pretty thin. And then while those eyeballs are cooling down or setting up, whatever way you want to do it, I am going to keep layering the soap. I'm going to wait about 30 minutes in between each layer, between the black and white, and kind of alternate. That way that the skin gets, you know, pretty hard on the soap, and that way, like I said, it's not breaking through the layers. The longer you wait, probably the better. I mean, if you can wait an hour or so, it's probably even better. But we're just going to kind of continue that pattern throughout. So, you know, it's pretty simple. Now for the fragrance oil for this one, I didn't start using the fragrance oil or adding it in until after I did those first 2 layers, because I just didn't feel like I had enough time, and there wasn't really enough soap to be adding fragrance to anyway. But I am going to use the Shave and Haircut from Brambleberry. I really love this fragrance. It's more of a men's fragrance, but it's super popular anytime I use it in soap. I just had like a tiny little sample bottle, or whatever their smallest bottle is. I ordered it for another project. I still had some left over. I'm just trying to get rid of it, and I thought this would smell good. Honestly, I don't think Beetlejuice will smell really good. I don't know exactly what he would smell like. You tell me down in the comments. But I was thinking about adding something like kind of crazy to it, but then I'm like, I don't know if that'll totally like ruin the vibe of the soap. So we're just gonna keep it with something that I know that people like, so people use the soap and I don't just have it like hanging out at my house or whatever. I'll give it to some friends and see how they like it. So while I was doing this, you'll kind of see in the next little layer that I do here, it kind of shows up on the camera, but I think I made a mistake. We'll see at the final cut. I get a little bit excited, and sometimes I pour a little bit too hot. You probably want to keep your temps under, I'm going to say 120-ish, or around 125. You know, 130 is probably going to start being a little bit hot. I got a little bit excited. I was trying to keep my temperature low enough to add the fragrance oil because I didn't want that to burn off. But not really thinking about that layer, the black layer that I have down there wasn't like completely hardened yet, because I had only waited like 30 minutes. And then I'm putting this other layer on top that's still relatively hot when I pour it. So I kind of noticed some the black seeping up. Again, that's why I don't really like the liquid colors, because I seem to have that problem a little bit more when I use them. Maybe it's just me, but I mostly think it's because I poured it too hot. So you guys can see that in a second. While I was waiting for this white layer to, you know, kind of cool down and stuff, I decided to grab the little eyeballs because they look pretty cool in the mold, and I really couldn't wait. They have been sitting probably for 2 to 3 hours. I'm not really sure. So I wanted to pop some of them out and see how they turned out. Some of them turned out a lot better than others, not going to lie. But again, this is why we do experiments on this channel, to kind of give you guys some ideas. But the ones that where I got like all of the color really centered in the black, just like a tiny bit, maybe 1 or 2 drops, were the ones that I thought came out the best. Here's an example of one of those. So it really does look like an eyeball. I probably could have done a little bit less of the green, but overall I think it came out good. I only needed 4 for this little mock-up, and I think I do have 4 that came out good enough so I can use it on there. But when I'm making new ones moving further along or like later in the year, whatever, I know that for the next time that I make little eyeballs. See, some of them are just kind of like little blotchy, but it's kind of hard to control that little dropper and get it kind of centered and make sure you're not dropping too much, because sometimes too much comes out. So overall, I'm pretty pleased with these. It just is something that is probably going to take a little bit of patience. So if you do that, keep that in mind. You have to have a steady hand as well. So once this sat for a few hours, I took it out of the mold and I began to cut it. I did notice on one of the bars of soap, the bottom layer sort of was coming apart. I guess I didn't squirt it enough. Sometimes that happens. It also makes a big difference at what temperature you're pouring the soaps. So if they sit too long or they're not, sitting long enough, sometimes they can come apart just like this one did. I'm going to show you how to fix it. With this soap design, it's not really a big deal, and I only noticed it on the one bar after I cut everything. So I just took something sharp. You can really take anything you have. I just had a pen sitting near me, so that's what I used. And then I took a little bit of the clear melt and pour base, and then I added more of that color pigment that we made earlier and kind of mixed that in. And I'm going to just take some extra of this and kind of squirt it at the bottom of that one after I put rubbing alcohol on it, everything. And that's going to hopefully hold the layer back together. I think it'll have just enough stick. Plus we're going to be pouring additional soap on top, so it really shouldn't be an issue at all. Now for adhering the eyeballs, we're kind of going to do the same thing that I just showed you. I'm going to score both pieces of soap, so the little eyeballs and the actual bars of soap themselves. I'm making sure that I'm scoring them pretty good because I don't know how sticky this will be since we added like glycerin to it as well, the liquid glycerin. But I want to pour just enough to kind of put the eyeballs on, and then I'm going to save the rest of the soap and kind of drizzle it all over to kind of give it an ooey gooey slime feel. Overall, I'm really liking this soap idea. I've had a lot of fun making it. I think I'll probably do something like this again. I might even try this with a cold process soap recipe because I think it would just be a much better design, and then use the kind of slime with some glycerin topping because I think it would just be a lot cuter and definitely a popular soap. Again, when I make soap, a lot of times I like to use melt and pour to just kind of get the design idea out there. I just want to remind you, if you've learned something today or enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It helps the channel out a lot and the video. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to watch more videos like this or be reminded of videos like this. I'm always trying to put new ideas out there just so that people can see different techniques on how to make soap, whether it be melt and pour soap or cold process soap. And I thank you guys for sticking around and watching to the end.